Hello, everybody, and welcome in to episode number 16 of the Super Bowl podcast. My name is Braden Norman. Alongside me, David Arnold, Harper Houck, as always. And we have a special guest. Sorry about that, Harper.
No, you're good. We
have a special guest today, and his name is Michael Potter. I've had the privilege of calling some games with him here on the campus of GCU, and he's been the voice of not only GCU men's baseball, but also GCU men's basketball, a couple other sports sprinkled in there, but really for the last couple of decades. It's been awesome.
Wow, sounds like a long time. I sound old.
Well, hey, it's been a good career so far, and I'm sure you're just loving it. It's some cool people here, some cool athletes to cover year in and year out. But thank you for taking some time out of your day. I know you just called a game this morning.
Yep.
Thank you for taking time out of your day for coming on the Super Bowl podcast.
Yeah, hey, thanks for inviting me. Sweet 16, I like it. That's where we're headed.
Yeah, there we go.
Men's basketball, Sweet 16 in the next 3 or 4 years, so I like it.
That would be awesome.
I like it.
And I remember you and I talking about, this season wasn't looking too well. Midway during the year, we didn't really know how they were going to turn things on. And you got to be right there on the court watching that experience, and we've had a couple basketball players on with Gabe and Ray in the past, and you got to see that firsthand, so that was probably a pretty cool experience.
Oh, it's unbelievable. I mean, yeah, look, everybody will tell you. I mean, if the team and the players are honest, they'll tell you they weren't playing very well, as a team. But I think, players play, man. And at the end of the day, I mean, Gabe stepped it up and played some games, especially on the road. Gabe had always played well at home, but on the road, some games that I'd never seen him play like that. Like just decided to play like a star, which you want guys to do. And Ray kind of decided, okay, you can put it on my shoulders and I'll do it. And then what was beautiful about that run was you got to have a couple of studs, and you had those guys. Mm-hmm. But then when they didn't have it, Kobe goes off and hits 6 threes, really 7 because he hit all 3 free throws when he got fouled, right? And he has a game like that, and you go, boy, I knew it was good. I didn't see that coming, and you had different guys step up. And so it was a really special experience. It was a great way to end the season for those guys because you could tell there were moments all season long, and you're like, gosh, dang, I hope it doesn't end like this. Mm-hmm. And they didn't let it. I mean, that's a credit to those guys, 100%.
Absolutely. We like to say that right after Gabe came on the podcast, he absolutely turned it on.
Credit to you guys then.
I guess so. Maybe part of it.
Credit
Not
for
to those guys. Credit to you guys.
All us, He did call a shot. He said after we finished recording that they were gonna go do it. They were gonna go win the WAC, and they did. So
yeah. No, they did, and it was good. You could almost see they kind of made a decision, like, "Hey, we're tired of this. We're just going to make this happen." And a couple things fell into place for them, but man, they took care of it.
All right, before we get into our first sports segment, we covered a little bit of basketball there.
Yeah.
You're also calling baseball right now, and a program that has really been on the rise the last 5 years, made the tournament the last couple of years as an automatic, or not an automatic bid, but an at-large bid last year. So becoming a top mid-major program. We're hoping that they're going to be a top 25 program. We've talked about that. This year hasn't been going necessarily the way they were expecting, but another year where they can go win the WAC and get in the tournament. Mm-hmm. How has that differed? And obviously, it's a busy season for you when you go from March Madness basketball straight into baseball.
Right.
How's that season been for you this year? And I know we've called a couple of games together. How do you think this might finish out? And maybe they can make a run to Omaha.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're definitely the top team in the conference. I mean, it was Sam Houston, right? Sam Houston just lost 2 at home to Utah Valley, which nobody saw coming. So I think GCU has what they need from a position standpoint. Starting pitching starting to come around. Avidia looked like the Avidia of his freshman year. Markle has looked better out of the pen. Maybe that's where he stays. Thornton's been unbelievable. Just a little more consistency in the bullpen, I think, is what they need. But yeah, I think they're one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the conference. So they have, I would think, them as the pick to win the conference when they get to the tournament. But yeah, they definitely have to win it. I mean, they've played in a way this year that they're not going to be an at-large bid, unfortunately. Yeah. But what happened last year was pretty special. I mean, it's hard to do what they've done the last 2 years with those wins over Texas Tech at home. I mean, even beating Tennessee earlier this year, and I know Tennessee's struggling a bit, but, they had every arm they came out of the bullpen was throwing 96. I mean, so the team's right there on the precipice. It's kind of like with basketball, too, we talked about. A lot of mid-majors make that jump, and they have a splash. Butler going to 2 Final Fours. what have they done since then?
Sure.
Gonzaga is the one that's been able to do it and sustain it. St. Mary's has started to sustain it in basketball. Coastal Carolina in baseball. Eastern Carolina. The Lopes are at that point where they're kind of right at that edge where they're starting to get there, and now they just got to start sustaining it in the top 25.
That's exciting. Yeah. And I know we have a couple Tennessee boys here, and I remember that. It wasn't, you were a Lope in that game.
Yeah,
but I remember Harper over here. He was
torn.
Yeah.
A little torn.
It was a win-win for you.
Yeah, I call it a win-win. They like to say it was a lose-lose. I like to think positively about that.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
I thought the funniest thing about that was looking at the Twitters afterwards. It's the second game of the year.
Oh,
and
yeah.
the Tennessee fans were like, we're done. What's up with Vitello? We're never going to win a game the rest of our lives. And I'm like, pump the brakes, guys. This is early. You guys got a really, really good team. Maybe you don't do what you did last year, but that was crazy what they did last year. You can expect that every year.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's a really good team over there. You're going to be fine.
Tennessee's fan base in like all sports tends to be pretty toxic and
I would agree.
overreactive about literally everything. So
Yeah. I'm kind of one who's on the outside. I'm not really a Tennessee fan in anything, but I love hearing the chatter, especially in football. If they lose one game, until they lose a game, it's like, we're going all the way. We're winning it all. And then one loss, and it's like, season's over, everything, fire the coach. Yeah. It's good.
Yeah.
Highs and lows for sure.
All right, well, let's get into our sports segment. It's one we've had before. It's called This or That. We're all going to ask Michael a question around the broadcasting space. And I think, Harper, you got a good one to start us off here.
Let's do it. So we're gonna ask about basketball and baseball here. Okay, so I think this is a pretty fair matchup.
Okay.
So this or that, a game-winning buzzer beater or a walk-off home run?
Yes. Oh, no, I have to say this or that?
That's kind of the game.
Yeah. I'm going to say a walk-off home run.
Okay.
Just because I'm at heart a baseball guy. I love calling basketball, and we've had some good buzzer beaters, some good finishes. But, man, there's nothing like a walk-off. I love it. And I've gotten to call a couple just recently with Cade Verduzco knocking one out of the park in the bottom of the 12th. So it's pretty fun.
Okay, cool.
What would you say that your favorite walk-off has been? I think back a couple years ago, I thought that Chauny Ortiz one was pretty special. I don't know if you were in the
Against U of
booth.
A?
Yes. I don't know if you were in the
So
booth
you know
for
what's
that one.
funny? I didn't call that. Barry called that one because that was a TV game.
Yep.
Right? So Barry and I think Rooney was in there. But that might be my favorite walk-off for this very reason. So I had got to the game late. Oh, I'd called did we have soccer that night? I'd called another game. I think it was soccer. And so I came over to that game, and as I'm walking in, I'm going to run up because I'm watching. I go, this is it might be a nice finish. As I see Bryce Drew, and I see Molly Miller. They had started to leave the game. I'm calling them out here because they had
Name
kids,
dropping.
right? Mm-hmm. So I stop and I start talking to them, and as we're talking, I just felt it. And I hear it, and I go, "Oh my goodness!" And I look over in the TV. And I go, "Did he just hit a walk off?" And Bryce comes running over, and Molly's like, "No way!" And I'm like, "He just hit a walk-off. Jenny hit a walk-off." And I kind of celebrated it with Bryce Drew and Molly Miller, so it's kind of cool.
That's interesting.
So I didn't call it, but it was a fun walk-off.
Yeah.
What a point of view. That's awesome. All right, well, here's one that's a little personal to me because I've been a color commentator on a couple baseball games with you. And this could go for basketball or baseball, but you get a random color commentator that is thrown on a game with you. Would you rather they be the type that doesn't say too many words, or would you rather they be the guy that maybe just doesn't even shut up? They can't get him to stop talking. What would you prefer there in that instance?
The first one. Okay. Less is more.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, now if they're really good and have a great point of view, that's one thing. But if it's TV, it's easier for somebody who keeps going because you don't have to describe what's going on. If it's radio, it's really difficult to have somebody who doesn't stop talking. That's why Paul Coral is so good with what we do. We've got a really good rhythm together, and he can kind of sense. He's been around so much basketball. Right. He can tell when I need to be quiet because something's about to happen and you need to set up, and when I don't. But yeah, if you get with somebody who just... I'll tell you. Can I tell you a funny story?
I would love to hear a funny story.
You guys Arizona guy, Frank Kush. He used to coach. He's the head coach at ASU. Old school. I think he got in trouble for grabbing a player's helmet and jerking him around. Anyway, he kind of built that ASU program. So old school, tough guy, right? So they started a program called the Arizona Boys Ranch, and it was for troubled kids still in high school. And they started a football program. It was way out in Queen Creek. And so I was at a Christian radio station, and we were doing Christian high school football, and somebody goes, "Hey, you should do these games for them to help them out." I go, "Great, I'll go do a game." So I go out there. This is the days when you had to string a phone line and plug it into the fax machine and dial it up. I mean, literally stringing a phone line 150 feet, right?
Wow.
And so putting it in and making the phone call. Anyway, Frank, they say, hey, Frank's going to do a game with you. And I was like, this guy, like he's like football royalty, ASU.
Cool.
Never stopped talking, but everything he said was so money. I didn't, and I'm like, I'm not going to say anything. But it would literally be like, it would usually be like, hand off to Johnson around the end, 2 yards, and that's a first down. Well, you know, Mike, that's a snap and a sack, 2 yard loss, a pass for 3 out of bounds. Like the whole game was just me trying to get that in, but it was still unbelievable because it was Frank Cush. It was like, if you think of a guy that you're like, oh my gosh, that guy was doing the game, but he didn't understand calling a game. He understood coaching, but his insight was unbelievable. So I didn't want to tell him to be quiet, you know. I just kind of peppered it in whenever he took a breath.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Where would you say I happen to fall in that?
I was gonna ask that.
You're the perfect range.
Let's go.
You don't say too much. You don't say too little. No, you really are, Braden. You're very, very good because here's my biggest pet peeve. Right? Is it's not about the broadcaster. It's about the game.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even necessarily always about the athlete. It's about the sport to me. It's about the game. And many times when an athlete does something fantastic, it becomes about them, you know, when Ray's going off for 30. Yeah, it's about the game in general, but he's the highlight of the game, right? It's never about the broadcaster. My biggest pet peeve, is this making too much noise when I'm pounding this?
No, I don't think so.
My biggest pet peeve about broadcasters now is so many guys on national TV, they want to make the game about themselves. And it's not about you. And so you do a really good job of not trying to make it about you, letting the game breathe, I call it, especially in baseball, and highlighting what's happening, adding to what's happening, but not trying to be a part of what's happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You're going to get your chances to do really cool calls, but let it come to you.
Absolutely.
So you actually do a really good job with that, brother.
Thank you very much. And
I'm not just saying that because you're here.
I was
awesome.
going to say maybe after the show you can give us your real,
opinion.
I'll give you the real deets.
us three.
I'll give you the real deets.
Yeah, cool.
all right, you got the last one here?
Yeah. Okay. So my question is: would you rather commentate a low-scoring basketball game or a high-scoring baseball game?
High-scoring baseball game.
Okay.
I just defense is so overrated, man.
Yeah.
Like, stop it. Score some points, man. It's funny. I talked to Bryce Drew about this. There was a game they won like 82-78 or something.
Yeah.
So much fun to call. So much fun. And he was bemoaning on the post-game show. And the third time he said, well, our defense, I finally said, Bryce, stop. Nobody cares about defense. We want to see offense.
Win the game, yeah.
We want to see an 82-79 game. We don't want to see a 52-49 game.
Yeah.
And he was just like, he started laughing. He goes, well, I disagree. And I know you do, but stop. Like, we don't want that. Now, high-scoring baseball game, if they're both high-scoring, is fun, you know.
Right.
I'd rather have a high-scoring basketball game and a low-scoring baseball game, if that's possible.
Yeah.
But that's a good question.
Yeah.
Cool. And I think I know what game you're talking about. Was that the UTA game, maybe, to start off that potentially. I remember that was a pretty high-scoring game.
That was a fun game, the first game of the tournament. It was a regular season game, but he did mention it at the first game of the tournament, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. When they started scoring those points, well, they started winning some games. So
Yeah.
Hey, I know. That's what hey, Bryce Drew is a way better coach than I'll ever be. He knows more about basketball than I'll ever know. That's the caveat. I'm just telling you what I like to see and what the fans like to see and what the players like to do.
I'm with you. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd rather see those college overtime games where it's like 7 overtimes and 65-64. Those are the best. Those are the ones everybody remembers. And
NBA
same with
games,
basket.
man, they want more. They want more offense.
100, 140, 138. Yeah.
Now you're
Crazy.
speaking my language. Yeah.
there we go.
So you doubled down on baseball,
Yeah.
on our this or that's.
Yeah, I did, right?
Yeah, you did.
I'm a baseball guy at heart. I love doing, but I get to tell you what it is. I love baseball. That's my favorite sport. So I love calling baseball. It's more conversational. You can have more time. There's more going on in some ways that you can actually talk about as it's happening. There's a lot going on in basketball too. But I just like broadcasting. Like I've never done swimming.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe we can.
I would
get you
love
in
to
the
do some
swimming realm.
swimming. Anytime, man. I've done men's volleyball, women's volleyball.
Okay.
I've done, softball. I've done lacrosse, women's lacrosse. I did a Pac-12 game, ASU, and who was it? ASU Colorado, and then I did LSU, and I forget one other. Women's soccer, men's soccer. Like, I just love broadcasting. It's just a lot of fun.
I agree. I mean, I know it's what an incredible opportunity I have to be able to call some of these games in college. And it's also been cool that, hey, if you're confident in calling a women's soccer game, like we're going to give you that opportunity, and that's been something I've tried to do. Try to be somewhat of a Swiss Army knife and not just put myself in one box there, because it's already a limited thing doing broadcasting, as you know. But if you say I'm really good at this one sport, you're just limiting yourself even more.
Right.
So expanding that has been something that you've done your entire career. Do you want to kind of dive into your story and how you did get into broadcasting? I know you're a graduate of GCU. You've been here.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can
saw
tell
some
that.
Cool teams.
I'll say to piggyback off of your last thing though, the answer is always yes.
Yeah.
So if somebody asks you, can you broadcast hockey? Yes. Because you can figure it out. Because if you can broadcast, there's certain skill set to be able to be a broadcaster. It conveys to every other sport, and you can learn about the sport. So I would say, before I tell my story, I'd say a couple of things. Don't ever get too arrogant, like be humble. So when they called me and said, hey, can you do a men's volleyball game? I've never called men's volleyball. I've never called volleyball. So I said, okay, I want a ex-player to call it with me. So we got Tim Griffin's son, Taylor, to do the game with me, right?
Cool.
And I met with him for coffee, and I said, okay, tell me all the things I better not say. And he goes, don't say bump, set, spike. That's old school. No, it's a kill. It's an attack. So I learned the words.
Okay.
And I didn't know how to chart a game. I went online, and there was I think it was a junior at Harvard calling volleyball games, and I was like, this kid's pretty good. I emailed him. He emailed back. He sent me his charts. Like, I've been in the business for a decade at the time, 2 decades, whatever. He's brand new, but he taught me something.
That's right.
So you always say yes, because you'll figure it out, have the confidence, but then you don't be afraid to ask somebody who actually knows what they're doing and take their advice, humble yourself. So I don't know if that works out, but
that's awesome.
Yeah, so
like
how I got into it, so I went to Grand Canyon in 86 to 90, so I'm old. But it was 1,500 people on campus, right? Literally the only thing I think still standing from when I was there on campus now is like Ethington Theater. Like that hasn't been
old?
changed, right? Yeah, it is. Nice. It even predates me. It's crazy. Brazel, though, of course, is the same field. They just built around it, right? So I came here. I was a theater major, did like 14, 15 shows. Claude Pinces, who is still here teaching, is the faculty athletic rep. He was my director and everything. But I made some relationships, and that's a key, too. A guy named Keith Baker was the athletic director, and I went to church with him at First Southern Phoenix, and we became good friends. And so much so that, like in 1988, when Westfall won the NAIA National Championship, I called Keith and I said, "Hey, we're going to go to the championship game. Can you get us tickets?" He said, "Yeah." He helped us out. So I'm from Kansas City. So me and like 10 other friends, we flew up to KC, slept on my basement floor, and we were at the national championship game in 1988, right? When Westfall cut down the nets. Always liked broadcasting, but I never did it in. I mean, there was no opportunities like there are now. For students here, like what you guys get to do with GCU TV or whatever they call it now is like unbelievable, the opportunity. And so I think anybody who gets that, don't take it lightly, be very grateful for it and, live up to it, the opportunity. So I moved out to LA and I was like, man, I want to do some broadcasting. I've never done it. So I would literally drive my little crummy Mazda GLC down to Chavez Ravine and buy a ticket. This will tell you how cheap it was. It's under $10 to sit in the bleachers. And I would take a scorebook and a cassette tape deck, and I would call games. I would sit as far away from anybody as I could. So I'd go in the middle of the day because I was brutal, horrible, and I would call games. And then I would call them, and then I would get in my car and I'd put the tape deck in. And like the first couple times, I couldn't get past like the first inning. Like I was so bad. It was just like, oh my gosh, how are you this horrible? And over the time, I got to where I could listen to an inning. And then it's 2 innings. Oh, I'm getting a little bit better. A 3rd inning.
That's right.
And then when I moved back to Arizona, I was working at a Christian radio station that was kind of changing to conservative talk, and they wanted to start a sports program. So I just started going down and watching games and reporting on them and stuff. And I called Keith and I said, "Hey, you want to do some sports?" And he said, "Yeah, I think we want to do baseball. We just got in the WAC." That was 95. So I did some WAC baseball games, 95 to 98. And then we did some Christian high school football, basically anything I could do. And, Tempe high school game, stringing the phone line 500 feet through a window into the AD's office, and halfway through getting a text and calling my boss at the station. He said, "Hey, you're off the air." And I had to face it. Somebody had needed a fax, so they unplugged my thing and put in their fax and then plugged me back in. That was what we did, And so then that kept going on, and I just kept a relationship with Keith. We quit doing baseball in like 98. Hadn't done games for a while. When Brian Mueller came in, and really said, hey, we're going to grow the ground campus. We're going to put money back into athletics. I called Keith. He hired Russ Pennell as the basketball coach. And I said, hey, you're going to start doing games again. And he said, yeah, probably, not sure. So I did, when Russ was here for 4 years before we transitioned, I did basketball games and a few baseball games, but men's and women's. So in the Pac West, women would play half an hour, then the men would play. So it was great for me because for 4 years I got to do probably more games than anybody in the state except for maybe Greg Schulte, because I was doing, double basketball and baseball, calling more games than maybe Healy was doing as many or more with his football and everything. But it was good because I got to be really bad and I got to get better and better and better and just keep doing games. And then when they went D1, we went on the radio, and it was good because I had those years of practice, And I've just been with it ever since. I do all the basketball on the radio and then fill in where they need me. And when I'm done with that, I try to do as many baseball games as I can.
Awesome. And this is, I wouldn't call it a side gig, but this is something that you get to do on the side of another full-time job. Do you kind of want to go into that really quickly and just that kind of give our viewers an understanding of how passionate you are about this, because you make yourself a whole lot busier than you could be, with your other job. Yeah.
I mean, shout out to my wife, Lori, because she allows me to do all this stuff because we have 4 kids, so she takes care of the kids and does all that stuff and is like, man, go do your thing. But yeah, so I'm in the insurance business, and so I just have had good bosses over the years. I'm in sales, so I've had good bosses, and bottom line, if you hit your numbers, you can kind of do more than you should. You can get away with more than you should be able to get away with. But I've hit my numbers over the years and made the sales I needed to get, and so I've had some really cool bosses who understand. Nice. Hey, look, you can still put all that time in, and this is a great hobby, and it actually makes you better at your job because you're doing something you love on the side too. And so I've just been able to do that. And quite frankly, now when I go in to talk about insurance and to produce a sale with somebody, the first 10 minutes, all we talk about is how was it playing Gonzaga? What was it like being at Ball Arena? What was it like being in? It really opens a lot of doors, quite frankly, into the other aspects of things.
That's so cool. I mean, and I've found, I'm sure this is the same for you guys, just having conversations, just the more and more conversations, whether it's an interview or not, that's going to help you build relationships, and it's going to help you in sales. So that's cool how those two crossed over. I never really thought about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to just kind of add on to that. It's, keeping yourself busy. Like, obviously, you have family, you have your job, your hobby. How do you kind of balance all of that? And, of course, we'll get into faith as well. How do you kind of balance all those and not, I guess, is it possible to say yes to too many things, in that way of like going about,
Yes, it is possible to say yes to too many things. I think far too many times, though, people are worried about saying yes to too many things, so they don't say yes to enough things.
Right.
Like I think it's a lot easier to pull back. I mean, people you deal with are usually pretty cool, and if you have good relationships, you can go to them and say, hey, dude, I totally over it. I cannot do that. I'm sorry. And most people are like, I get it. That's not a problem. Most people are kind of cool about stuff like that. But I think most people, they don't say yes to enough stuff. There's an acting thing when you're doing acting and when you're doing scenes and stuff where it's yes and. So when you're doing role playing, or when you're doing I forget what they call it now, like the Groundlings and Saturday Night Live guys and all that stuff. If I give you a scene and I say something, the natural reaction is to say no and to do something else. No, you say yes to whatever I give you, and you add on to that.
Yeah.
And I've kind of tried to live my life that way, like yes and. Like, do you want to call women's lacrosse? Yes. And I'd love to do, women's soccer too, and just keep going. And I think you people start realizing, oh, this is a guy who will get in his car and drive down to Tucson and call a women's soccer game, and then drive home because he wants to do broadcasting. He likes it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How would you say allowing your, not that you're necessarily proclaiming your faith over the air when you're calling games necessarily, but you're at a place where if you had to, or if you felt like you needed to, you could do that. But also just the people you're working with, there is a faith-centric thing within the GCU athletics, which is pretty cool. How would you say that experience has been for me in just this short 2 years? I think that's been really cool, and meeting people like you. How would you just describe that experience over these last 15 years?
Yeah, I think it's really cool. I mean, I think there's a lot of Christians out there at non-Christian schools that not only have to hide their faith, some do. Some of the schools you have to actually do that. Other schools, it's just not as open. It's just not there. Like, I'd have never felt like I couldn't talk about my faith with anybody, you know, and they would be willing, even if they're not a believer. It's like, this is what we do here, you know? And so I think it's a really unique place in that sense, that President Mueller, that culture he's kind of started, and that, like, Pastor Tim bleeds and everybody, and Bryce Drew in basketball, I mean, Andy Stankiewicz, Wally, all the coaches. It's like, hey, you don't have to be a Christian to go here, but this is who we are. And so we're going to live our life, you live your life. And I think, you know, I've always thought, and I know there are people who make a living doing this, you know, arguing for the faith and all that, and there's a place for that. That's never been my shtick. And I don't mean to reduce this to somebody calling it a shtick, but I've never been into that. I've always kind of been like, God doesn't need to be defended. Like, he's big enough, and he can take care of himself. And at times you have to stand up and toe the line and say, this is wrong. But many times with people in relationships, to me, Jesus was, yes, there is a sin and there's not sin, but it's also about, hey, I love you and this is a better way to live your life and you should come along this way because all the stuff you're dealing with, I have answers to that. But it's your call, you know?
Right.
And so I've tried to live my life that way. There are definitely times when you have to stand up and say, no, we're not doing that. But many times with people, I think people want to come out and say, you're living your life wrong. And it's like, how about you love them first and see what happens?
Exactly. And I think we've talked about that a few times, shoving it down people's throats. People don't always react well with that. Yeah. And going off of all that, what you just said, the industry, the broadcasting industry, isn't known for being Christian-based. So what are some examples of ways that you've been able to witness to others?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I first of all, I kind of try to think of it as do the best job that I possibly can and be the best person I possibly can and be there if people ask me questions. Yeah. I did a thing when I was doing acting and stuff, and I would kind of try to say a prayer when I was at GCU because I felt like God had called me to that, and I wanted to honor him and I wanted to express him, but I was doing a Shakespeare play, so there was no like, you should become saved in the Shakespeare play, right? You should give your life to Jesus. I mean, I had to do that, you know, and calling a baseball game, it's not about that. It's about a baseball game, right? Sure. So I'd always pray, you know, God, I don't know how it's even possible remotely that you can shine through what I do here, but just do it, you know, because I can't figure out how to make that happen, but you can. And every once in a while you'd have people, I actually remember when I was freshman, sophomore, a lady come up afterwards and she goes, I loved your performance, blah, blah. And I go, thanks. She goes, you're a Christian, right? And I go, how did you know? She goes, I could just tell. Now, cool. I mean, I'm at GCU, it's a Christian school, so maybe she had a heads up, but you know, I think you just kind of do it that way and you hope for the best. Yeah. And you let God kind of take care of it.
Right. And I think that's a good point of just kind of leading by example without even really, you know, by your actions, people can tell of, hey, there's something, he's doing this for a reason, you know, like for a deeper reason. And like you said, that's really cool that somebody just came up to you and was like, hey, you know, are you a Christian? You didn't have to really profess, you know, like say it out loud, but people can just have that kind of reaction without even, you know, really just you doing your job and doing the best that you can. I think it's really cool.
That's right.
And I would say, even if they don't say that out loud, I think that's pretty rare.
Yeah.
A lot of times they'll just feel that and they'll go on with their day and wonder what was different about that person, and at least gets the ball rolling and allows God to do the work. I thought one cool, and I mentioned that we were going to talk about this beforehand. There was a basketball player who was, you know, in the transfer portal that you and I got to talk to. He was coming over to sign some autographs for you, which is awesome. And I just happened to be there with you, and we got to talk to him about the process, and a lot of excitement there, and a lot of people talking, a lot of coaches calling him, and it was cool how you just said, "Hey, I'd love to pray for you" in that moment. And I think that is just so big. Prayer is just huge, and whether you're a believer or not, it's not like somebody's gonna say, "No, I'd rather you not pray for me." Like they'll at least accept it, and you got to feel something when there's a real prayer. So I thought props to you in that moment, but also, is that something you've been able to do more often with these athletes over the years? That was just the one time I was with you.
Yeah, that's honestly probably the first time, because I kind of grew up in broadcasting, kind of old school, where, you know, Vin Scully, obviously one of my idols, would kind of not even want to fly on the team charter because he didn't want to become friends with these guys because it was a different thing, you know? Yeah. And that's changed a lot. And I don't know if it's bad or good. It's just changed a lot, you know? But with that one, with that athlete, you know, it was Chance. And I don't know. I woke up that morning and he had said he would meet me to sign some autographs for my daughter because that's his favorite player, or that's her favorite player. And I was actually doing my daily devotion. And I was like, you should pray for Chance if the opportunity arises. Because, I mean, we forget these guys are unbelievable athletes, and they do things that you think they do things at a level that's far beyond their years, but they're still 22 years old, having to decide, do I stay at this school? Do I go to that school? Do I believe what this person's saying? That's a big deal. And I thought, I should just pray for that guy and just that God would guide him to the right place. And I hope he did. I mean, he said committed to Texas Tech, and I hope that's the right place for him because he's a great guy. And I've also tried to live and try to tell my kids and stuff that, life isn't a zero-sum game, meaning if you win, then I lose. And if I win, then you lose. We can both win. Yeah, he left. He was a great player. I wish he had stayed, but that doesn't mean we can't have a great year and he can't have a great year.
That's right. Absolutely.
So why would we be upset about that? If he thinks that's the best for him, if he really feels like God wants him there, then great. We should be happy for Chance and pray for him. And I don't do it as much as probably I should, but at that moment, it was just really kind of a strong, hey, you should pray for this dude. He's got a big decision to make, and let him know that people care about him here still.
Totally. And we are rooting for him. And I think, it's a whole nother level of college basketball now. And I think he's ready for it. And so we're excited for you if you happen to be watching this, Chance. And
of course he's watching it. Come on, Lope's up.
That's right.
Lope for life.
Yeah. So that's cool. And, I just remember you in that moment saying that I felt like God told me right in that moment I should pray for him. And I think that's a battle that I'm trying to get overcome, and not necessarily overcome a battle, but I want to be bold in my faith. And that's something our podcast is about, is super bold faith and understanding God's telling me to do something right now. Yeah. Super bold faith. There we go.
Yeah.
If God's telling me to do something right now, if he's asking me to pray for somebody right now, that I have the strength to do it without worrying about what somebody might think about me. So it's cool, and I think we need more of it in sports. Totally.
Yeah, and I think it was really cool, thinking of it from, you can tell, like what I talked about earlier, Dorman, about how people can notice when you're praying with them, like that you care, and that, for as Christians, right, when we pray, it's like, it's because we love you, and I think they can see that, and the person, even if they're not a Christian, right, will still know of how much we care and want them to, succeed and want God's light to shine on them, right? But I agree. I think that's something is so cool with our name and kind of the brand that we're trying to make here is just being bold in our faith, and I think that's something that is a battle in today's culture, in today's age, right, with different challenges and different things being pushed, right?
Sure.
And I think, our light has the opportunity to shine brighter and brighter in a world that could be potentially getting darker and darker. And so I think it's important for anybody watching and for us just to simply lead by example, right? And to take those steps, because we don't know how that can impact somebody. And maybe we won't know, but it will be something that God can use when we allow him just to have access in our life.
That's right. Michael, a second ago, you were talking about your children. Can you tell us a little bit more about them and what your role is in bringing them up in the faith and allowing them to have both faith?
Yeah. So we have 4 kids. Emma's 23. Man, I'm setting myself up to get these wrong and get in a lot of trouble. This is being taped. All right, I got to think this through. 23. She's an easy one, though, because she was born in 2000, so I just got to do a little quick math. She's 23. She's a grad student at Rice, at French Horn Performance. They're all classical musicians. Gracie and Caden are twins, and they're 20, going to be 21 in October. Gracie's in California, Caden's in Ohio, and then Lily's 15, and she plays piano and does ballet. But a lot of what I'm doing with my wife is providing for them, giving them opportunities to explore and try different things, And I don't think we weren't really a household that was. We didn't really push like, hey, you got to do this, you got to be this way, you got to go to church every Sunday, you got to do this stuff. But, we prayed, we read the Bible, they knew how we felt about it. And then as they got older, they started getting more involved and more interested in it and kind of learning that path there. I think, the Judeo-Christian morals were already there. there's a right way to live your life. I think there was a lot of talk about the Jesus way, of the perfect example of how you should live your life, and it's the best way. Some people get mad when I say the best way because they say, no, it's the only way. It's like, yeah, it's the only way, but it's the best way too.
Same thing, yeah.
Sure. But people have a choice, and they can choose to not live the best way. And stuff happens when you don't live the best way, and it's your call. But yeah, I think that's what the kids, and it's really just honestly building a good relationship, at least how we've done it, so that they can contact us and call us, and we talk to them every day. My wife talks to them every day, and ask any questions, and a safe place to kind of fail and learn.
Love that.
And you're around a lot of athletes, obviously, in this college space of 4 years, usually, where a lot of decisions can be made. A lot of lives are changed. I mean, I think once you get to college, that you're at that level of maturity where you're living on your own, and all of a sudden, when you don't have your parents, you need somebody, and God's there for a lot of people. So you see a lot of athletes, and you see probably directions where it's gone not great, and you've seen athletes that have been on the court or the field that have really been awesome and changed lives. I guess what would you say to the younger athlete, because you have seen so many of them and so many journeys and stories? What would you recommend for young Christian athletes coming up on how to remain in their faith when there's just a world full of social media and just me when it's so easy to be me right now in this day and age? I guess, how would you go about saying, hey, let's put God first and then we'll talk about me? Yeah,
you just said it. As far as advice goes, I'm going to tell my kids, play for an audience of one, and everything else takes care of itself. That's easier said than done. It can become a trite expression, right? Especially when you're really good at something, because people want to give you stuff and people want to hang on and latch on and be a part of it, in talking to the coaches here, and because I'm always intrigued, I'm very interested in building a program. Wins and losses are important. You got to have them. But I'm always interested in how do you build how does Gonzaga build that program that still does that, you know? And you have to be really focused on so many things that wins and losses aren't necessarily focused on. And when I talk to them about recruiting, they always say, when they get down to it, it's the fit. Like, you got to go to a place where you fit. So if you're a Christian and you want to play for a Christian coach, then find a Christian coach. Don't be sucked into, I want to play at a Power 5. I want to play it. Go to the place that's the best fit for you. It's very hard to do when people are calling you and doing this stuff.
Yeah.
And the best fit might be somewhere else, but go to the place that's the best fit and where you can be yourself. I mean, all the coaching staff we have, they're all Christian men, and they talk about the fact that, they lived their Christian life at every stop along the way. But is it easier to live your Christian life in a sense of, at GCU than maybe at Vanderbilt?
Oh, yeah.
Probably, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just kind of where you're at in your walk and where you want to be. But getting good advice and taking good advice from people that you respect and you want to be like, I think that's a big part of it too. But the fit is always what they come down to. You know, I mean, you can have do great, but the fit is the big part of it.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool point that you see, because sometimes, like you said, there can be people wanting you over here, wanting you over there, and it can be tempting to, maybe sacrifice something that, maybe God's calling you to do or whatnot to go to the best fit on paper, right? But maybe, I guess, like, when you give it up to God, right, and let Him kind of lead you, He built you, He knows you. And so, when you have Him, He knows your best fit. And so the really cool thing there is just like we can, direct, we can make our path, right? But God directs our steps. And I think that's a really cool way of, like, really testimony of what you've seen is the fit is what's important, and maybe not like the money that comes with it or the scholarships, like in a world where that is a high priority, thinking about how would I fit in? Like, where does God want me to be, and how can I be used at that school? I think that's a really, really cool thing.
Yeah, and it is interesting because with NIL coming in, I do think it changes things.
Right.
And
changes everything.
100%.
Yeah.
And I do feel
it's professional sports now, boys.
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you. When you take money from somebody like that, they expect something in return. And I've heard secondhand of some guys who left schools that weren't given a lot of NIL to go to schools with big NIL, and they were shocked dude, you're a pro now. Like, you're a professional, and professional athletes have to perform or they get let go.
And I was thinking about it today, really. I was looking at some college basketball transfers, and I'm like, these guys are getting fully prepared for the NBA if they're so lucky enough to make it there. You know, we see all that movement in the NBA. It's crazy. But portal combat, I think, is what they're calling it now. It's nuts.
It is.
What did Bryce make this year? Bryce Young, I think he was like almost $2 million in NIL deals just this year alone.
Yeah.
That is ridiculous.
Crazy. And it is interesting to think about the percentage of college athletes that are going to go on to the professionals. Very low. But also, if you're GCU, you're an up and coming program, and you don't want to necessarily sell yourself that way and say, hey, only a certain amount of athletes are going to make it to the pros. So how about you come here to where you come to a place where you can win, do well, and you can also build your faith, because you're going to need that over something else, because you're probably not going to make it to the final stage. Obviously, you don't want to say that, but I do think GCU has a certain aspect to it where they can use that in recruiting with, hey, you can build your faith here, and then let's see what you can do on the court. Would you say that's true? And
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you got to use all the arrows in your quiver, because this is the game we're playing now, right? So you got to be able to pay some NIL dollars to get the guys you want. I know you don't, you can't use it as a recruiting tool, blah, 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 but you got to have that availability. You got to be able to show, hey, you come here, you can get some NIL deals, because that's part of it now, right? But I do think it's also finding that proper fit for you. And it's also, look, the vast majority of student athletes aren't going to make it to the NBA that are playing in college basketball. But we have a multitude of players playing overseas, having really nice lives. I mean, Dwayne Russell is one of the best players overseas. I mean, Trey Drexel, he had an up and down final year with us here. He's on Dwayne's team, and that's one of the best backcourts. I think, are they in Germany or France? I mean, they're doing great. You know, Josh Braun went off and played professional ball. Now he's back running the club sports stuff. So that's there for a lot of college athletes, and it's an unbelievable experience to take. So I think you got to. I mean, recruiting is a war. You got to do it all. I think the nice thing about it is, from what I've seen from the coaches I've been close to recruiting, you know, they're honest with kids. You know, I mean,
that's big.
Maybe to a fault, right? I mean, Bryce Drew is like, hey, this is where you see you. This is what we do, and he does not want to, you know, shine any kid on to get him here. He wants to make sure it's a right fit and do the right thing and live the right way. And it's a great example. And it does. People do see it. Oscar Freyer was not recruited by Bryce Drew, but then when he had to sit out that year for the academics, there was a question: do they want him back? Does he want to come back? Whatever. And Bryce, you know, along with President Mueller, they made the decision that, hey, Oscar should come back. You know, and it was more than just he's a great player. It was a lot, right? Yeah. And Oscar came back, and I maybe did the last interview ever with Oscar, unfortunately, because it was right after they won the WAC championship when they beat Utah Valley, and was, you know, the COVID year, so hardly anybody was there. And I did an interview. I was way up, and he was way down with a long cord because we couldn't be close to each other. But I asked him, I said, what was that like when your coach prayed for you? And he said, that was the highlight of my college career, that Coach Drew called me in before that last game, and he said, we talked about my future, and he said, I want to pray with you. And he said, no coach has ever done that before. That made an impact in his life. And then, unfortunately, 2 weeks later, he's gone, right? And that you got to win. You want to go to the Sweet 16. All that happens, but then you hear a story like that, and you go, okay, that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that is the biggest thing, and we have an audience that enjoys sports, and that's amazing. That's one of our biggest passions, all four of us, I would say.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to it, it is just so minimal in levels of importance. And unfortunately, there's probably not going to be sports up in heaven. You know, I'm guessing that's probably not going to happen.
Who knows?
I think there is. I think we're going to be broadcasting it too.
That would be pretty cool. That would be pretty cool. But I don't know. Any last words, guys?
Yeah, I was going to go off of that. I think as an athlete here myself, there's something that just drew me here. Something intangible, you could say. The coaches, the administration, they have principles that other schools don't. And that all ties into the Christian background we have here. And they're preparing us not only to succeed in whatever sport we're doing, but in life, and to grow in our faith, to go out and be bold and unashamed for who we live for.
Yeah. And I think it's really cool and attractive to the players, too, with coaches they know that have their best interest. You know, like with Bryce, we had Ray on the show, and he told us about the decision for him declaring for the draft came from Bryce Drew. And obviously, we at GCU want him to stay, But I think he gained a lot of respect, and like that's definitely a respect thing when Bryce, it may not be the best thing for the program per se, but it's the best thing for the player. And I think that kind of environment attracts more players and in a way builds a program of like,
that's right.
This is what we're here to do. We're here for you guys. So, yeah.
Well, I would just say what an exciting time it is to be at GCU. Obviously there's some people are heading out, but there's always going to be more athletes that come in, and I think things are only on the up, and I think you're going to be a big part of it. You have been a big part of it, and I'm sure this is an exciting time to be calling sports here.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, when I started, I never thought I'd have already done 2 NCAA tournaments, right? I called the first regional game down there. Didn't go last year, but getting to call conference championships and stuff. But honestly, the last thing I'll say is it really is the people. Like when I think back through, I remember getting to call the final, the walk-offs and the buzzer beaters and stuff like that. And that's fun. That's exciting, right? But I remember the guys who did it. I remember Braylon Pickrell hitting a turnaround jumper on the far side to beat Dixie State, now Utah Tech, and John Judkins, who's still the coach there, and to see Braylon do that like that, he's going to remember that the rest of his life. He's just a good dude, and he made that shot. Nick Witherall shot him the ball. I remember those guys, and I remember the coaches that came through that have gone on and done other things, and all the different players, and so those relationships, seeing Dwayne Russell working out in the summer it's just cool because I remember watching Dwayne play and his progression and stuff. So, it's a blast to be a part of. I mean, the athletic department, Brian Mueller had a vision, and not many people have that kind of vision. And people went, "You're nuts," and he ain't nuts. It's happening. And Jamie Boggs keeping it going, and her whole staff, and it's just a lot of fun to be a part of. Just to be able to see it happen.
Yeah. It's been a great 3 years here. I think it's been a lot of fun for us, and it's gonna be fun to be an alumni. And maybe down the road, hopefully, a couple of us can be working here too. So I think it's a cool place, and it's an attractive place to work and come play. Before we let you go, I know you've got a podcast as well, right? You can maybe shout that out if you'd like to.
Yeah, it's an on again, off again podcast. It's called the Pottercast. It's on.
Oh, cool.
Nice. It's on Spotify. Not as intricate as this with the video and stuff, but no. I mean, I get in little rhythms where I'm like, I'm gonna do that, and I do like 3 or 4, and I'm like, I haven't done one in like 3 months. I should probably do one. But I got Brian Mueller on. I tell you what, if you guys, anybody out there listen, you got to listen to that one. We talk about this guy just thinks differently. Like the great thing about that too at GCU is you can surround yourself with people that have the same similar core beliefs, but they just see things so differently. He sees the world as a businessman so differently, and I love being around that. And he's so gracious with his time. And we talked about what he saw and how he made that happen, how you connect. This is my vision to, actually doing it and things like that. Bryce Drew's on there. Greg Wallace is on there. Some of the other coaches. So anyway, it's called Pottercast. It's on Spotify, and then maybe this will encourage me to do a few more podcasts.
Perfect. Well, we appreciate you coming on, and
it was fun. Thanks.
Feel free to send any coaches our way. I'm sure we'd love to have Bryce Drew on at some point.
All right, I'll work on it. I'll get him over here.
Wink, wink.
I'll get him over here.
Sweet. Awesome. Well, this episode is going to be coming out probably around July or August. We don't know quite yet. So obviously that means a postseason baseball run is going to be coming to a finish. Hopefully that went well. Hopefully, maybe some more playoff baseball is what we're hoping for him. We'll see what happens. But thanks so much for coming on. We're excited just to see what you continue to do with GCU Athletics. We love hearing your voice. We love seeing the calls, but also we just enjoy you as a person. So thanks for coming on, man. Any last words? You get that out of the way.
No, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. It's a lot of fun. We'll do it again sometime down the road, and I'll work on Bryce Drew. I'll get him on here. Bryce, if you're watching this, you got to come do the podcast. Let's do it.
There it is.
All right. Well, that's going to be the end of this episode. Thanks so much for watching. We will catch you guys next time. Peace out.